I first saw a video cassette player in 1984. Now, they were often top-loading at this point and a real luxury machine to have. There was also no recording function on those early machines, which is why I said video cassette player. It wasn't until around 1987 that our household first got a VCR, or a video cassette recorder. That was the year that I turned 14. I remember specifically that this was the same year that MTV first launched in Australia, appearing on Channel 9 on Friday and Saturday nights. And for the first time, we could watch music videos by our favorite artists, although not all of them. My tech nomination for 1987 is the VHS Cassette. And I would argue that the coming of this piece of technology was in those days the biggest revolution since the cassette Walkman. Looking online, I can see that by 1987, roughly 90% of US households owned a VCR. And this was the case most likely globally as well. It was a global phenomenon. The best analogy that I can think of how the VCR and the VHS cassette changed the experience of watching television is to compare it to playing computer games. It was like when you could suddenly save your game or save your progress in a computer game, or having no lives. The television experience went from being passive to one where you had more control and were more active in the decision making around the parameters. There was no more just sitting in front of the box. You could now choose what you wanted to see for the first time ever. And all thanks to the VHS cassette. With the mainstreaming of these bad boys, we could now program the VCR to record things late at night or only on in the middle of the night when we were sleeping, some obscure show, or we could also sit on the floor and manually record a TV show and press pause or stop every time the adverts came on, and you could record episodes of your favorite show on one tape, all without adverts. We could also set the recorder to tape something while we were out, so our lives were no longer determined by the television schedule. And we could also use the VHS tape to start saving and collecting our favorite shows on one dedicated tape, like a collection. That meant we could watch the shows when we wanted, without having to rely on television scheduling. And with MTV on the scene, it meant we could also record our favorite music videos and watch those on repeat over and over again, rather than watching the live show and hoping that one of our favorite songs might come on. Just like you can on YouTube today. This was how the MTV generation got its start. The other good thing about the VHS tape was that these were personal, private. These could be stored in your room, or they could be shared with friends, passed around. I could keep hold of them like a diary and choose to share it with friends if I wanted to. This cassette really democratized content on television. It meant that suddenly there were tapes out there with all sorts of subgenres of content, things like whether surfing, graffiti, hip-hop, or skateboarding. There was a video out there for every kid who was interested in something that was not typically shown on mainstream TV. And these tapes could be passed around and watched offline, sometimes without parents knowing. Again, there was no charging needed, no accounts, no software, no subscriptions. This was a tape. You could record something, keep it in your room. This tape allowed you to record content off the television and keep it safe for watching offline, so to speak. So for Generation X, the VHS cassette opened the door for a little bit of rebellion. There were always grown-up videos that we weren't allowed to watch, but the VCR sorted that problem out. And besides, they weren't often home anyway. I'm thinking here, of course, films like Freddy Krueger, The Exorcist, Chucky, even Full Metal Jacket, and one of my personal favorite, Colors. And remember, there was no way to watch a film on demand until the advent of the VHS cassette, unless, of course, it was on scheduled TV. And for that, you also needed a TV guide. And the late 80s, early 90s was the heyday of the video rental store, where you'd go in and probably spend an hour looking through hundreds of video boxes on the shelves, looking for something worth renting. And occasionally, you'd find something worthwhile. These stores were usually independent. I remember my one back in Melbourne used to be called Video Easy. But I remember also renting videos from 7-Eleven, and it was only later that the mega franchise chain Blockbuster appeared on the scene. In later adulthood, I had more disposable incomes, so I, like many other people, began assembling a collection of videotapes. They came in various formats, such as these sleeve Star Wars. Some came in these special edition cardboard versions, but the most standard type of video box was this plastic container. If you'd ever wondered where the name box set comes from, it's from these collections of VHS tapes that came literally in a cardboard box. But most of them had these plastic sleeves for cases. Now, before collecting these video cassettes for the video project, the last time I touched one of these was probably around 2002, and that was when I started switching over to DVDs. I also had less need to record stuff, and not to mention, it was around this time that I discovered Napster. Nevertheless, it was interesting putting this back into the old VCR machine and hearing that classic clunking, whirring noise of the tape starting up and the flap opening inside, including when it finally came on screen, seeing that video warping and those black and white streaks that would appear across the screen when you watched a tape. Nevertheless, this channel is all about tech and tech nostalgia, and the VHS cassette tape is about as influential as it got. I would say just as influential as the ordinary cassette tape for music. These were durable, portable, and iconic, and above all, highly, highly personal, and they changed the game. And this is my tech nomination for 1987, the humble VHS cassette.